Picture this. The sun is already rising over the plains near Cannae, and the air feels wrong before a single sword strikes. Dust hangs low. Armor is already heavy on Roman shoulders. Men stand packed so tightly they can feel each other breathe, and somewhere ahead, Hannibal is waiting. Now stay with me, because this is not just the story of a battle. This is the story of the day the Roman Empire, or what would become its unstoppable image, came terrifyingly close to breaking an open field. Most people know Cannae as a disaster, a massacre, a masterpiece of military tactics, and yes, it was all of that. But here's the thing. What makes this moment unforgettable is not only how many Romans died, it's what the defeat exposed. Roman pride, Roman pressure, Roman fear, and the brutal truth that even the greatest war machine in ancient Rome could be lured, compressed, and nearly erased in a matter of hours. Picture the scene with me. A mass of Roman legions, confident in numbers, pushing forward under standards that had survived other campaigns, other humiliations, other losses. They believe weight will win, discipline will win, Rome will win. But the field they step onto is already becoming a machine built against them. And that is the twist we are going to unpack together. Because they did not lose by accident. They did not fall because they lacked courage. They were broken by a decision chain, by heat, pressure, formation, command, and by an enemy who understood exactly how Roman confidence could be turned into Roman suffocation. Before we go deeper, subscribe, because here we do not tell Rome like a textbook. We rebuild it like a living, breathing scene. Hit like if you want more Roman Empire campaigns, battle breakdowns, and power struggles told with tension, clarity, and consequence. And share this with someone who loves ancient Rome, because what happens here does not stay on the field. It changes the future of war itself. Listen, by the end of this story, you will not just know how Cannae happened. You will understand why Rome survived it, and why the men who walked into that plain never saw war the same way again. So let me ask you this. If you were standing in that Roman line, seeing the numbers on your side and the dust ahead, would you trust mass and momentum, or would you stop and question the field itself? There are moments in war when the danger is not what you see in front of you, but what you believe too early. Cannae begins there, not with the crash of shields, not with blood in the dust, but with confidence settling into the Roman camp like a false kind of calm. Two consuls, a massive army, and a belief so heavy it almost feels physical. This time, Hannibal will be crushed by weight alone. The morning does not feel heroic, it feels crowded. Men are already sweating before the advance begins. Leather straps bite into skin. Metal warms fast under the southern sun. Standards lift above a field that looks open enough, simple enough, manageable enough. That is how traps work in ancient warfare deception. They do not always hide in forests or ravines. Sometimes they sit in plain sight and wait for pride to do the rest. Watch this, because the invisible blockage at Cannae is not a wall on the field. It is inside Roman judgment. Rome comes in thinking numbers are the answer. After earlier humiliations, after Hannibal's string of victories, the instinct is obvious. Gather overwhelming force, compress the battle, drive forward, break him by sheer mass. It sounds reasonable. It even sounds Roman. Discipline, pressure, momentum. But that logic carries a flaw so lethal that by the time the legions feel it, there is no room left to correct it. Before we go further, you need one detail most retellings skip. Cannae was not only a clash of armies, it was a clash of readings. Rome read the day one way, Hannibal read it another, and one of them understood the field better than the other. Polybius and Livy both preserve the broad outline, though accounts vary in numbers and emphasis. The casualty totals may be inflated by later tradition, but the strategic picture is clear. The Romans deployed immense infantry depth,
trusting massed force at the center, while Hannibal arranged his line to invite exactly that pressure. That matters.
Because what looks aggressive from one side can look predictable from the other. So imagine the Roman command problem. You have the larger force. You are under political pressure. The Senate wants results. The people want revenge. Delay looks weak. Caution looks like fear. Let me be blunt. Roman command mistakes often begin long before the first order is shouted. They begin when politics narrows what a commander feels allowed to choose. That is why this battlefield is already tilting. Rome is not walking in blind. Rome is walking in convinced. Convinced that Hannibal must finally break if hit hard enough. Convinced that forward motion is control. Convinced that the enemy standing there is the main problem. But Hannibal's most dangerous weapon this day is not merely his cavalry or his veterans. It is his ability to shape Roman behavior before contact even starts. Here is the human part people miss. A legionary in that line does not see the whole design. He sees the back of the man in front of him. He hears officers pushing order through noise. He feels the formation tighten. What he experiences as discipline is also becoming compression. What feels like strength is slowly becoming suffocation. From here, Rome is no longer simply advancing into battle. Rome is advancing into a geometry chosen by its enemy. This is the turn. The so-called advantage, more men, more pressure, more certainty, begins converting into a hidden blockage. The deeper the Roman infantry pushes, the less flexible it becomes. The more it commits to the center, the more it risks losing the space needed to think, pivot, and breathe. Hannibal does not need Rome to panic. He needs Rome to keep doing exactly what Rome thinks will win. Picture the line moving, dust rising thicker now, commands growing harder to hear, the formation pressing inward on itself as much as forward against the enemy. No one on the Roman side believes they are entering a trap, because traps are supposed to announce themselves. This one feels like progress, and that is what makes Cannae terrifying. Not the first strike, not even the first collapse. The real horror is that the fatal mistake begins as confidence. Quick and direct. If you were in command with superior numbers, would you trust pressure and hit the center hard? Or hold back and test the field first? Write your call below. Because the next question decides everything. If Rome's strength was already being turned against it, what exactly did Hannibal build on that ground to make the legions help destroy themselves? Some defeats begin with a feeling that looks almost like victory. That is the pulse inside Cannae as the Roman mass starts to move. The front surges, the pressure builds. From inside the formation, it can feel like the enemy is giving way already. And in battle, that sensation is dangerous. Because once men believe the line ahead is softening, they do not slow down. They lean in harder. Hannibal understood that instinct better than the men marching against him. Picture the field from above for a second. Rome is built for impact that day. Dense infantry, force stacked behind force. A human battering ram meant to crush the center and decide the fight fast. The logic is brutal and simple. Hit hard enough, keep pushing, make the other side fold. That is why this moment matters. Rome thinks it is creating momentum. Hannibal is creating shape. Listen, this is the detail that turns Cannae from a battle into a machine. Hannibal does not set a rigid wall in front of the Roman legions and hope it holds. He places his center forward in a curve, a living target that invites Roman aggression. As pressure comes in, that center does not shatter at once. It bends. It gives ground carefully. Step by step, it draws the Romans deeper, tighter, farther into a pocket they do not yet understand. What feels to Rome like progress is actually direction. They are being guided. Polybius, our clearest early narrative source for the battle, describes the Carthaginian center yielding in controlled fashion, while the stronger African infantry on the flanks held position for the decisive phase. The exact sequence is debated in detail, and ancient numbers are always suspect, but the core tactical design is widely accepted. The Roman push was not merely resisted, it was absorbed and redirected. That is the brilliance here. Hannibal does not fight Roman strength head-on in the most obvious way. He gives it room to overcommit. He lets Roman confidence spend itself. He makes their best instinct drive forward, serve his design instead of theirs. And this is where the killing ground takes form. The Roman infantry is pressing inward now, crowding itself. Men in the rear force men in front to keep moving. Dust thickens. The line loses clean breathing room. Orders have less space to travel. Individual courage still exists, but the formation is no longer behaving like a flexible weapon. It is becoming a compressed mass. Powerful, yes, but increasingly blind. That matters more than raw numbers ever could. Watch this. The battlefield is no longer flat in a strategic sense. It has layers now. The center is sucking Rome inward. The flanks are waiting. Cavalry pressure on the wings is preparing to make escape and adjustment even harder. Hannibal is not simply winning ground. He is building conditions. By the time the Romans realized the center's retreat was not collapse but design, the geometry of the battle has already changed around them. After this, Rome is no longer choosing the tempo. Rome is moving inside a trap that grows tighter with every successful step. That is why Cannae feels so modern in its terror. It is not only about slaughter, it is about manipulation of momentum. Hannibal turns movement into confinement. He turns dominance into exposure. He turns Roman certainty into a corridor leading straight toward enclosure. Here's the thing. Most armies break when fear arrives too early. At Cannae, the Roman line is in greater danger because fear arrives too late. At first, the men pushing ahead likely think the enemy is weakening. By the time they understand that the field itself has been shaped against them, they are already too deep, too packed, too committed. So answer this like a commander, not a spectator. When an enemy center starts giving way, do you trust the collapse and drive through? Or do you stop and wonder who benefits from your momentum? Put your decision in the comments, because the next step is the one Rome could not undo. If Hannibal built the killing ground in front, what made the Roman command walk into it with such confidence that pride itself became part of the weapon? A battle can become unreadable long before it becomes unwinnable. That is the state Rome is drifting into at Cannae. Not total panic, not chaos in the theatrical sense. Something more dangerous than that. A field that still seems understandable from the command level, while down in the pressure of dust, noise, and movement, the truth is already slipping out of reach. What makes this block so important is simple. Rome did not step onto that plain without a plan. There were scouts, there were officers, there were signals, standards, spacing, command habits built by generations of campaigning. Roman warfare was not improvisation, it was procedure. Men were trained to move under orders, to read symbols, to trust alignment, to believe that discipline could turn uncertainty into control. And most days, that worked. Cannae is terrifying because the plan made sense, until the field began answering back. Think about what Roman command wants from a battle like this. Clear frontage, pressure concentrated where the enemy can be broken, reliable signaling, confidence that the larger infantry mass will dictate the outcome. On paper, that sounds like the kind of structure Rome was built to impose. Even the emotional logic is Roman. Absorb the fear, hold the line, push forward, settle the question by force. That is not stupidity. That is institutional habit. But war does not punish only bad plans. Sometimes it punishes plans that are just plausible enough to be trusted too deeply. Breathe for a second and step into the sensory problem. Dust is lifting with every movement. The field is growing thicker, hotter, harder to read. Sound travels badly once bodies and shields begin compressing space. Standards still matter, of course, but the deeper the infantry drives into the center, the more local survival starts replacing broad awareness. A man can obey and still not understand. An officer can signal and still be too late. A commander can think he is pressing advantage while the actual shape of the battle is turning against him. That is the false clarity Hannibal creates. Not confusion everywhere, directed confusion. The Romans can still see enough to believe the battle is unfolding according to expectation. The center in front of them is yielding. Their own pressure feels effective. Motion exists. Momentum exists. The enemy does not appear to be smashing them backward. In the Roman mind, those are all positive indicators. Yet each of those proofs is part of the deception. The battle is readable in the wrong language. Here's the thing. Pride at Cannae is not men boasting with swords in the air. It is operational confidence. It is the assumption that the Roman way of organizing battle is still in command of the field because it is not visibly collapsed. That kind of pride is quieter, colder, and much harder to detect while it is happening. A Roman commander wants to reduce uncertainty. That means reading terrain, placing infantry depth where pressure will tell, trusting that discipline can absorb stress better than the enemy can. It also means believing that once the engagement starts, Roman cohesion will outlast foreign flexibility. There is a reason that belief existed. It had been earned in other wars. But at Cannae, Hannibal is weaponizing the very thing Rome relies on most, the expectation that order itself guarantees clarity. Ancient accounts do not give us a modern battlefield map with perfect precision, and some details remain disputed. But the broad consensus is solid enough. Roman infantry was heavily concentrated toward the center, their formation dense and forceful, while Hannibal's line was deliberately arranged to manipulate that pressure. The problem was not simply that Rome lacked information. The problem was that the information Rome had was being interpreted through confidence shaped by previous success and political urgency. That is why pride becomes weight. It does not float above the army as an idea. It sits inside the formation. It adds force to every shove from the rear. It encourages command to read resistance as weakness. It makes the line denser, narrower, less willing to pause and reassess. It tells Rome that hesitation is the greater danger. And in a way, that is true for many battles. Pause too early, lose nerve, open disorder. But this was not one of those battles. Listen, clarity in war is not seeing movement. It is knowing what that movement means. Rome sees the enemy's center giving ground and reads victory. Hannibal sees the same motion and reads alignment. Rome feels compression and interprets commitment. Hannibal feels Roman compression and knows the jaws are beginning to form. The same field is speaking two different truths, and only one side understands the translation. That is why this story carries so much power. The trap at Cannae is not built only from tactics. It is built from interpretation. A bad commander can be beaten by superior skill. A competent commander can be destroyed by a false sense of understanding. That second kind of defeat is colder. It lingers longer. It teaches harder lessons. From here, Rome is no longer losing because it lacked courage or discipline. Rome is losing because its discipline is being fed into a system that no longer rewards its assumptions. Take one legionary in the packed center. He cannot see the whole line. He knows the men behind him are still driving forward. He knows the enemy ahead is giving space. He knows the standards are up. He knows he is doing what Rome trained him to do. Nothing in that immediate experience screams disaster. That is the cruelty of the moment. The collapse is beginning while many men still feel they are participating in success. Watch this. The plan did not become madness in 1 second. It became blindness by degrees. A little more pressure, a little less room, a little more dust, a little less communication, a little more belief that one final push will settle everything. And then the field stops being a battlefield in the Roman sense. It becomes a chamber. That is the Roman weight of pride. Not arrogance as an emotion, but confidence so committed to its own reading that it cannot feel the moment when method becomes vulnerability. So I want your judgment here. If you were commanding under those conditions, heat, dust, pressure, partial visibility, what would matter more to you? Keeping momentum or creating space to see clearly? Put your answer below, because the next step is brutal. Once the legions can no longer read the field correctly, how does that blindness turn into the first real fold in the line? What kills an army is not always the first break. Sometimes it is the moment before the break, when men are still moving, still obeying, still telling themselves the shape holds, even as the structure underneath them starts to give. That is where Cannae becomes unbearable. The Roman line does not collapse like glass. It starts to fold like something heavy, overcommitted, and unable to pull its own weight back. By this point, the road to disaster has already done its work. Not only the march to Cannae itself, but the entire Roman habit of movement leading into battle. Scouts, patrols, assumptions, the belief that the enemy will eventually have to meet pressure in the proper way. Rome was excellent at procedure. That was its shield on campaign. Camps were laid with discipline, routes were guarded, units moved with order because security in ancient warfare was never luck, it was system. But there is a hard truth here. A system can protect you on the road and still fail you if the enemy understands how predictable that system has become. Hannibal did. He knew Rome liked certainty. He knew Roman command wanted a battle that could be read, compressed, decided. He understood that if he could shape expectations before contact, then the actual moment of folding would come too late for the legions to stop it. So the killing ground was never only a patch of earth. It was a process. March the Romans in. Let them trust the scale of their own force. Let them believe that security procedures, forward pressure, and visible momentum still mean control. Then turn that trust against them. See the field at eye level now. The air is rough with dust. Men in the center are no longer fighting with elegant spacing. They are fighting inside a press. Shields knock awkwardly. Bodies tighten shoulder to shoulder. The push from the rear does not feel like support anymore. It feels like weight. Officers try to keep order, but order inside compression changes character. Signals do not travel cleanly. Choices shrink. A legionary's world narrows to the breath in his throat, the shield rim near his face, the enemy directly ahead, and the force of his own side driving him forward. That is when a formation begins to lose shape without immediately losing courage. Listen, this matters because courage and cohesion are not the same thing. The Romans at Cannae did not suddenly become cowards. They were still fighting, still pressing, still trusting the chain of discipline that had carried Rome through earlier campaigns. But a line can remain brave while becoming tactically helpless. Once the infantry mass goes too deep, once the sides begin tightening, once the field stops giving room for command to adjust, bravery becomes trapped inside structure. Men can stand firm and still be dying inside a design they no longer control. Ancient narratives, especially Polybius and Livy, give us the broad pattern even if small details remain contested. The Carthaginian center yields. The Romans continue driving inward. Stronger forces on the flanks prepare the decisive pressure. Cavalry outcomes on the wings intensify the danger. The exact timing of every phase is debated, as it often is with ancient battle accounts. But the consensus is unmistakable. Roman forward success carried them into a zone where success itself became the mechanism of enclosure. That is the fold. Not a dramatic scream from the whole line. Not one cinematic instant where everyone realizes the truth together. More like a body bending under force from directions it was not built to resist. The front keeps moving. The sides start to harden. The available space inside the Roman mass starts vanishing. A man in the center may still believe one more effort will finish the fight, while somewhere nearer the edges, the geometry is already turning lethal. Here's the thing. Rome had built its military reputation on making chaos smaller. Drill, camp routine, hierarchy, standards, punishment, repetition, all of it existed to stop fear from spreading faster than orders. That is why Cannae cuts so deep into Roman memory. It is the moment when procedure cannot reopen the space it helped close. The same discipline that drove the mass forward cannot easily reverse it. The same obedience that gives Roman battle its force now delays improvisation. An army trained to hold and push is being asked by reality to do something much harder. Recognize the invisible point where commitment has become entrapment. And most of the men inside that pressure cannot even see that point. Picture one sector of the Roman line where the soldiers are still leaning into what feels like productive combat. Ahead, the enemy center has not stood rigid. Good. That suggests weakness. Around them, their own ranks are dense. Good. That suggests strength. Behind them, more Romans are still feeding pressure forward. Good. That suggests support. But all three good signs are beginning to lie at once. The yielding ahead is invitation. The density around them is suffocation. The support behind them is compression. After this, Rome is no longer fighting on a field. Rome is fighting inside a closing mechanism. Watch this. The first fold in a battle is often psychological only after it is physical. The body of the formation changes before the mind of the army catches up. That is why the moment is so cruel. Recognition arrives late. Too late. By the time command senses that the line is not merely advancing, but being shaped, the room required to correct the mistake has already been spent. So this is the decisive emotional truth of the block. Predictability kills before panic does. The march, the assumptions, the expectation of a readable battle, the confidence in mass. None of that looked foolish at the start. Yet all of it made Rome easier to guide toward the exact pressure point Hannibal wanted. Let me ask you something tactical. In a battle where your strongest formation is becoming too dense to maneuver, what do you value more? Maintaining pressure so morale does not crack, or risking disruption to reopen space and control? Put your answer in the comments. Because what comes next is the nightmare Cannae is remembered for. Once the line begins to fold, how does that fold become a circle no Roman infantry can break? Pressure has a sound when too many men are trapped inside it. Not the clean impact of one line striking another, but a crushed, grinding noise. Boots slipping, shields scraping, breath shortening, commands disappearing into bodies packed too tightly to obey them. Cannae reaches that point when the battlefield stops behaving like open war and starts behaving like a closing chamber. By then, the Romans are not only fighting Hannibal, they are fighting time, heat, thirst, dust, and the terrible cost of bringing so much weight into one place. That is the premium layer most retellings miss. Armies do not move on courage alone. They move on grain, water, pacing, animals, camp order, transport, and the ability to keep men effective long enough to matter. A massive Roman force looked impressive at Cannae, but size creates its own hunger. It creates urgency. It creates pressure to force a decision instead of living inside a prolonged strain. That urgency matters. A commander with enormous numbers does not simply think, I can win. He also thinks, I need this resolved. Every hour of delay works against comfort, supply, and political patience. The larger the army, the greater the burden behind it. That is why logistics often hides inside strategy like a second skeleton. You do not always see it, but it is holding the whole shape up. And if it is strained, choices harden. So when Rome commits at Cannae, the decision is not purely emotional, not purely tactical, and not purely political. It is also logistical. Fight now. Use mass now. End uncertainty now. That does not excuse the disaster. It explains its tempo. Picture the plain again, but this time do not focus only on swords and formations. Feel the dryness in the mouth. Feel what dust does after enough feet churn it into the air. Feel what heat does once armor stops being protection and starts becoming burden. Hear how hard it becomes to pass an order through men who are already breathing like they have been carrying a wall on their backs. In that environment, a battlefield can turn from difficult to fatal very fast, because the body loses options before the mind admits it. Listen, this is where resource becomes bottleneck. The Roman infantry mass was designed to overwhelm. Instead, it becomes too dense to refresh itself, too compressed to maneuver, too committed to disengage cleanly. The deeper it drives, the harder it is for the men inside that packed center to get air, footing, visibility, and command clarity. Meanwhile, Hannibal's design is maturing around them. The Carthaginian center has done its work by bending. The stronger African troops on the flanks are positioned for the killing compression. Cavalry success away from the center sharpens the enclosure even further. What began as a contest of force becomes a problem of confinement. Polybius preserves the essential shape of that destruction, even if ancient casualty numbers remain controversial and almost certainly inflated by later retelling. Still, the mechanism itself is not in doubt. Roman mass presses inward. Carthaginian resistance channels it. Flank pressure intensifies. Space vanishes. That is the tactical core. But what makes it humanly horrifying is how logistics and battlefield environment magnify the trap. Thirst is not dramatic from a distance. Heat is not poetic when you cannot breathe. Yet those things help make the circle hold. Here's the wild part. Once men are enclosed tightly enough, individual strength becomes less valuable. Skill with the sword matters less when you cannot swing fully. Discipline matters less when there is no room to reform. Even courage changes meaning. It becomes less about advancing and more about enduring suffocation while death approaches from the sides as surely as from the front. That is the circle of death at Cannae. Not a neat ring drawn on a map, but a human prison made from tactical intelligence, exhausted bodies, limited space, and decisions already spent. The Romans do not merely lose the initiative. They lose the physical conditions required to recover initiative. That is far worse. An army can survive surprise. It can survive fear. It can even survive local defeat. But when it loses room, time, and breath all at once, the field itself becomes executioner. Watch this. The battle is no longer asking who is braver. It is asking who still has space to function. Hannibal's answer is ruthless. His men on the edges can still act with shape and intent. The Romans in the center are being crushed into reaction. Front, side, rear pressure. Every layer of the enclosure reduces Roman options until the great army that came to decide the war becomes a trapped mass struggling inside its own density. The same numbers that looked like certainty now make escape harder, signals weaker, and panic deadlier once it finally arrives. From here, Rome is not simply being beaten. Rome is being processed. That sentence sounds cold because the moment was cold. No flourish, no mercy in the mechanics of it. Just force, arranged so well that the enemy helps complete the trap through his own momentum, his own scale, his own inability to reverse the flow in time. Imagine being one of those legionaries now. There is no broad, heroic view, no map in your hand, no knowledge of how the whole line looks, only bodies, noise, dust, the hard shove of survival. Maybe you still believe the answer is one final push. Maybe you no longer know where the front truly is. That confusion is the final tax Cannae collects. It strips Rome of orientation. Quick and direct. If you knew your army's size was becoming a liability under heat, dust, and compression, would you force the decision early anyway? Or pull back and risk looking weak? Drop your answer below. Because the next step is the part that should have been impossible. After a slaughter like this, after the circle closes and the field becomes a grave, how does Rome refuse to die with it? There are defeats so large that they try to become a story before they become a fact. Cannae was one of them. Long before everybody was counted, long before every survivor reached safety, the meaning of the battle was already racing ahead of the truth. Rome is finished. Rome is broken. Rome cannot survive this. And that is where this part of the story becomes almost as frightening as the slaughter itself. Not on the field, but in the mind of the world around it. Hannibal understood terror beyond the blade. He knew that destroying an army was one thing. Making cities, allies, and enemies believe the war was effectively over. That was the multiplier. A massacre can kill men. A narrative of inevitability can kill resistance. That is why Cannae mattered far beyond the plain. The battle did not merely spill blood. It released a rumor with military force behind it. Picture the atmosphere after the news begins to move. Messengers arrive in fragments. Faces are gray, names are missing, standards are gone. Entire sections of the Roman ruling class have vanished into the disaster. In homes, in camps, in allied communities, one question starts spreading like fire under a door. If an army that large can be swallowed, what is left between Hannibal and Rome? Listen, this is the moment many states die. Not when they lose once, but when fear starts writing policy faster than leadership can. Ancient sources, especially Livy, preserve the emotional shock that followed Cannae, though the speeches and exact dramatic details must be handled carefully. Ancient historians often shaped scenes for moral force. Even so, the broad picture is credible enough. Panic in Rome was real. Losses among the elite were severe, and the psychological effect was enormous. The city had every reason to imagine the worst. Hannibal had not merely won, he had made Roman invincibility look like a lie. And still, Rome did not surrender. That is the hinge. The same political culture that had helped create the pressure leading into Cannae now had to do something harder than aggression. It had to prevent collapse of morale. Doom talk had to be contained. Public fear had to be managed. Elite panic had to be restrained. Allies had to be watched. Leaders had to make sure that a battlefield defeat did not become a civilization-wide permission slip for disintegration. Here's the thing. When people say Rome survived by strength, they usually picture Roman legions, walls, steel, and command. But after Cannae, survival was also administrative, psychological, and political. It was rumor control. It was refusing to let grief become policy. It was the state saying, in effect, yes, this happened. No, you do not get to declare the Republic dead. That refusal is one of the hardest Roman qualities to admire without flinching. Because it is not warm, it is not sentimental, it is disciplined in the same cold way Roman war was disciplined. Fear is acknowledged, then boxed in. Mourning is real, but public order comes first. The machine has been wounded almost beyond comprehension, and the answer is not collapse, it is harder procedure. After this, Rome stops imagining that one glorious field battle will save everything. Rome becomes more severe, more cautious in some ways, more relentless in others. The defeat at Cannae does not end Roman power. It burns away illusion. Watch this. The day Rome refused to die was not the day Rome looked strongest. It was the day Rome looked most breakable and still chose continuity over despair. That is why Cannae matters so much. Not only because Hannibal achieved one of history's great battlefield victories, but because even that victory could not force the final sentence. The world may have whispered that Rome was done. Rome answered by staying in the war. So let me put the question to you directly. After a catastrophe that seems to prove your enemy cannot be stopped, what matters more? Striking back fast to restore pride, or controlling fear first so the state itself does not fracture? Write your answer below, because the final step is the one that seals the whole story. If Rome survived the day it almost ended, what changed forever in war, politics, and the Roman mind after Cannae? By the time the light begins to fade from this story, the field is no longer a battlefield in the ordinary sense. It is a memory being burned into Rome. Morning had opened with confidence, with numbers, with the hard certainty that this would be the day pressure finally crushed Hannibal. By the end, the plain near Cannae has become something else entirely. A lesson written in dust, blood, and silence so deep that generations would keep hearing it. That is why Cannae never stayed only in its own century. It became a reference point, a warning, a model, a wound. The immediate human cost was staggering. Ancient authors give numbers that may be inflated, and accounts vary, but no serious reading of the event makes it small. Too many Roman lives were lost in too little time. Senators, officers, legionaries, allies, families tied to names that did not return. The scale of death mattered, yes, but the deeper legacy came from the method of it. A great army had not simply been defeated. It had been understood, shaped, compressed, and destroyed by an enemy who read its habits better than it read the field. That changes the way war is remembered. Cannae teaches that numbers can become a burden, that momentum can become a corridor to ruin, that tactical brilliance is not always louder than brute force, but it can be far more permanent. Long after the dead were gone, commanders across history kept returning to this day for one reason. It showed what happens when an army mistakes pressure for control and confidence for vision. Listen, this is the final stamp of the battle. Rome did not forget the terror of enclosure. Rome did not forget what happened when politics, urgency, pride, and battlefield compression fused into one fatal decision chain. After Cannae, Roman thinking hardened. Caution gained new weight. Attrition, endurance, recovery, and refusal became central to survival. The Republic did not become gentler. It became colder, more adaptive, more difficult to finish. Hannibal won a masterpiece of destruction. But Rome learned how dangerous it was to seek salvation in one overwhelming strike. And that, in its own severe way, changed the world. Because Cannae stands at the intersection of two truths. One is tactical. This was one of the most devastating encirclements in military history. The other is civilizational. Even after a day like this, Rome remained standing. Scarred, humiliated, terrified, but standing. The battle changed how enemies viewed Rome, how Rome viewed itself, and how later generations understood the price of battlefield genius. Picture the last image with me. Not the charge, not the crush, the aftermath. Wind moving over armor, dust settling onto bodies that will never rise, broken standards, survivors carrying a silence heavier than shields. Somewhere far from the field, a city trying to decide whether grief will break it or harden it. From here, Rome is never innocent about war again. So here is the question I want to leave with you. Was Cannae the greatest victory Hannibal ever won, or the moment Rome began learning how to become impossible to destroy? Tell me your answer below. And that is how a single day near Cannae almost pushed Rome to the edge of history. Not with myth, not with legend alone. With heat, pressure, bad judgment, tactical brilliance, crushed space, and the terrifying truth that even the most disciplined power in the Mediterranean could be made to suffocate inside its own confidence. What happened there did not just destroy men. It stripped away illusions. It showed that a massive army could be turned against itself, that momentum without clarity could become a death sentence, and that the cost of power is often paid in the moment power thinks it is safest. But this is the part that stays with me most. Cannae did not only reveal Hannibal's genius, it revealed Rome's deeper instinct to endure after humiliation. That is what seals the consequence of this story. After Cannae, Roman politics grew harsher. Roman military thinking grew more careful, more adaptive, more aware that glory without control could end in catastrophe. The Republic absorbed one of the worst battlefield disasters in its history and still refused to vanish. That refusal became part of Rome's long-term strength. So breathe for a second and hold the final image. The noise is gone now. The dust is settling. Wind moves across abandoned armor. Somewhere on that plain, broken standards lie among thousands who will never return home. No speeches, no triumph. Just the silence that comes after a day so violent it changes the language of war itself. And that is the final declaration. Cannae was not the day Rome died. It was the day Rome learned the price of surviving. That is why this battle echoes so far beyond its own time. It became a permanent warning to commanders, states, and empires. Numbers are not enough. Courage is not enough. And pride without vision can bury even the strongest army on earth. If this episode pulled you into the field and made you feel the weight of what happened, subscribe now, because the next story will take us deeper into the campaigns, decisions, betrayals, and turning points that shaped Rome step by step. Leave a like if you want more Roman history told like a living scene instead of a cold summary. And share this with someone who loves the Roman Empire, Hannibal, or ancient warfare, because this is the kind of story that stays in your head long after it ends. And tell me below, after Cannae, what matters more in war? Bravery, discipline, or the ability to adapt before it is too late? In the next episode, we can step into the Roman answer to disaster. How Rome rebuilt, endured, and kept the war alive after the day that should have broken it.